Friends, welcome to my channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It's not difficult for you, but it's nice for me, and we're starting. He wasn't sure how long he had been sitting alone on the terrace at the back of the house. The sun had long since passed noon as he replayed the morning's events in his head. If someone had told him a week ago that his life would turn out to be such a disaster, he would have considered it madness. He had a successful career and a wonderful home. He had a gorgeous, talented wife, whom he loved more than life. Better yet, he was convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt that Susan felt the same way about him. And now? He just didn't know. His heart was breaking as he listened to Susan's muffled sobs coming through the sliding door. If only she could admit what she had done, if she had just told him honestly that she had slept with John Strickner and begged Early to forgive her, maybe he could feel some hope. At least then they would be on the path to healing. A few months of counseling mixed with serious work to restore communication, and maybe he and Susan could be together again. They will never go back to where they were before all this happened. Those halcyon days are gone forever. When the trust in a marriage is broken, some of the pain will never heal. But at least if Susan had admitted the wrongness of what she had done, they could have moved forward. Early thought about all the evidence. Susan's lies about being at home, the fact that she wasn't in the office on Thursday and Friday, and Susan's gray BMW parked outside John Strickner's garage. Even more frightening were Susan's own words talking about how she helped John and that he deserved it. God, how could she? But despite all the evidence, Susan still wanted to get rid of the annoying excuses. Early wiped the moisture from his eyes. The worst part was that Early, knowing about his wife's affair with John, still loved her. By the time Early realized that the house behind him had become very quiet, several hours had passed. He decided to go look for Susan. Maybe she was thinking more clearly, more seriously. Maybe, having had some time to reflect on the sad state of their marriage, Susan was ready to admit what she had done to ruin their marriage. Perhaps there is still a chance to move along this path to healing. Early was surprised to see things as they had left them. The sink was still filled with dirty dishes. Susan's things were still where she'd left them, and his cup of tea was still on the mantelpiece next to their wedding photo. The house was eerily quiet. A slight panic crept into the back of Early's mind. What if Susan did something stupid? What if she tried? No, no. He couldn't even imagine something so terrible. Susan had betrayed him for career advancement, but she was still his wife, the woman he promised to love for better or for worse. Speeding up his pace a little, Early hurried into the bedroom. What he saw was definitely not what he expected. Dressed only in a white satin basque, wide belt, and matching lace panties, Susan sat at her dressing table, carefully combing her beautiful long hair. They shimmered in the late evening light, looking even more beautiful than he remembered. Then Susan put down the comb, opened a new pack of black nylon stockings up to her thigh, and began to pull one stocking over her leg. Early sighed in disappointment. Susan, if you're thinking... Susan didn't even look at him. Don't even think about it, you bastard. The harshness of her words conveyed the look Early had often seen on her face. It was the angry determination of a lawyer preparing to attack. I'm like that. I'm so mad at you. She froze for a moment, her whole body tensing. Damn you, Early Conroy. The penitent Susan was what he expected. Susan in passive denial he might have expected. Determined Susan, stubborn and adamant in her insistence that she was not to blame, would not have been a surprise, but an angry woman spitting out venomous words was the very last thing Early expected to see. Susan took a deep breath, shook her head, and then finished pulling an elastic stocking over her long, beautiful leg and prepared to put another one on her left leg. She stuck her foot in a stocking and stopped. If I didn't love you more than anything in the world, I would leave you right now and never look back. What? Early spat out. Do you have the nerve to attack me when you voluntarily broke our marriage vows? I caught you prostitution. You care more about your career than your marriage, and I'm the bad guy? Susan didn't say anything. When she had smoothed out the last nylon, she crossed the room to her closet. It took her a long time to get her favorite, a little black dress. The strapless mini dress had just enough lycra and nylon to fit Susan's figure, highlighting all her best features. Where are you going? Early demanded. Why should I tell you? You wouldn't believe me if I told you. You don't trust me, remember? You made that clear today. Don't you think I have a right to be suspicious? Of course. Everyone has the right to be an idiot. Now I'm also an idiot. Early fumed as he watched his loving wife get into a tiny dress, knowing that he would not help her take it off tonight. Are you going to see him again? No, I'm not going to John's. Susan looked at herself in the mirror. And I still don't like the way you sarcastically spit out your comments about what I did. If only you knew what those 2 days were like. Thanks. I'd rather not know that. I am not one of those who likes to be a cuckold and listen to the dirty details of his wife's rumors. Early, I may be guilty of a lot of things. Poor communication in the first place, but I'm not guilty of anything you're talking about. What I did was wonderful, and nothing you can say will change that. She looked at Early's smirk and added, but you know it happened, don't you? Yes, Susan, Early sighed. I know what you did. Why can't you just admit it? I can forgive you, but we will never begin to heal as long as you deny. You know what I did, Susan repeated, emphasizing the second word. Yes, of course I do. What do you think we talked about this morning? Although Early didn't notice it, Susan's voice indicated that she was going into lawyer mode. And do you have proof that you know that this is true? Susan emphasized the same word as before. Of course I know. Early sighed in disappointment. Susan, don't dodge. Don't deny it. We both know what happened. You are welcome. No, I know what happened. You only think you know. Susan straightened the dress over her hips, making sure that the skirt was pulled down low enough to her knees so that she could seduce. I saw you, Susan. Susan burst out laughing. Did you see me? That's what I need to hear. Your car was parked outside John's house. I saw her there on Friday. You spent 2 nights with him. Susan slipped her feet into her most beautiful stiletto pumps. Early, you're a great problem solver. I'm proud of how well you're doing at work. Your boss doesn't know how talented his employee is, but when it comes to getting a closer look at things about your personal life, you suck. Early ignored the jibe. Aren't you going to tell me where you're going? Susan smiled and shook her head. Like I said, you won't believe anything I tell you anyway. I'm not going to see John, if that's what you want to know. Besides, all I'm going to tell you is that I belong to you, only you. I have always been and always will be. I'm not going to do anything tonight that would jeopardize that promise or make me feel ashamed of myself. If you leave, I might not be there when you get home. It's entirely up to you, Early. I can't make you believe me or trust me. Whatever you do, just remember that I love you. With that, Susan got up, checked her makeup one last time, put on lipstick, and headed for the door. Before leaving the room, she turned and looked at Early. And only a fool goes to court with only indirect evidence to support his version. Before he could stop her, Susan hurried to her car. He listened in shock to the sound of her heels tapping on the wooden floor. A few moments later, Susan's BMW came to life and drove out of the garage. Then, in desperation, Early grabbed a book that was lying on the bedside table and threw it at the closet door. His vision suddenly blurred, and Early collapsed onto the edge of the bed. Early couldn't believe what had happened. His beautiful wife, whom he loved more than life, had just left the house, looking like she was going on a date. She claimed she wasn't going to date John Strickner, but if not John, then who? Were there any others? Was their marriage really over? From where he was sitting, it certainly seemed to Early that this was the case. Wiping tears from his eyes, Early wandered back through the house, stopping in the kitchen to pour himself a whiskey and soda. After taking a long sip, he suddenly noticed Susan's bag, still lying on the chair in the dining room, where she had left it in the morning. He stared at her for a long time as he finished his drink. When she left the house, Susan hinted that Early had no hard evidence to prove him right. Well, if that was what she needed, he would have given it to her. He unzipped the bag and roughly dumped its contents on the dining table. Sweatpants, a swimsuit, not the hot little red bikini that Early liked so much, but the one that was more modest, more ancient. Jeans and an oversized t-shirt fell out of it. He also found a John Grisham novel, pajamas, and a change of underwear, not the best Susan wore, but what he expected her to wear at home. There was a set of Susan's toiletries in a separate bag. He rummaged through her and found only the bare minimum. A toothbrush, a comb, a few remnants of cosmetics and creams that she usually used. Nothing special. Hmm. A strange set for a 2-day date. Not exactly what he expected to find. Early took the novel. What about this? Who takes a book on a date? The Kama Sutra. Maybe, but John Gresham's lawyer? He was still rummaging through the things scattered on the table when the doorbell rang. Early didn't answer, but when he persistently called a third time, Early changed his mind. It was Jennifer, Susan's executive secretary. Hi, Jennifer. How's Brandon? Both Susan and Early admired Jennifer. Jennifer, who was not a single mother by choice, was forced to deal not only with a child with spinal deformity, but also with her husband and father, who abandoned them shortly after Brandon was born. The only help Brandon's father had was a check in the mail every month, and with Susan's help, that check was as big as the law allowed. Oh, Brandon feels great. Thanks for asking. These last couple of days, when there was only special attention for him, made him a very happy little boy. It made Early feel good. At least Jennifer seems to have benefited from a couple of days off. Brandon was a sweet and good-natured boy, and Early was pleased to learn that he and his mother had spent 2 days together. Is Susan here? Early sighed and tried not to look too angry. No, she's gone for a while. Oh, what a pity. I hope you know what a wonderful wife you have. I'm sure she's told you everything she's done in the last week. She's so romantic. Early was stunned. Do you approve? Jennifer looked confused. Oh, my God. She didn't tell you. She backed toward the door. For me. I'm sorry. Don't let Susan know that I said something. Jennifer's hand was on the door handle when Early stopped her. Wait, do you know what I don't know? What's going on between Susan and John Strickner? Jennifer tilted her head in confusion. Susan and John? You mean the Melrose case? No, I mean the 2 nights they spent together. Jennifer squealed and then burst into fits of laughter. Oh, Early. If Susan told you that, she was just kidding you. Jennifer's face slowly started to turn red. Susan didn't spend those 2 days in John's bed. I did it. That's what I wanted to tell her. John asked me to marry him, and we have already set a date. Early opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. He felt unsteady on his feet. Are you all right? You suddenly turned as white as a sheet. Well, Susan, I spent 2 days at John's house, taking care of Brandon, while John and I spent 3 wonderful romantic days in Cancun. She did it for you. Early. It was supposed to be a surprise. Shit. Early leaned back against the closet door in the hallway. Early promised to tell Susan that Jennifer had stopped by, and also agreed not to say anything about their conversation. As soon as he was alone, Early rushed to his Mercedes and started looking for a gray BMW. Considering how she was dressed, there weren't many places he expected to find her. What bothered Early the most was what Susan was doing right now. He knew that his accusation about John Strickner was false. What Jennifer had told him suddenly matched what he had found in Susan's bag. Not a romantic date, but just custody of the child. She was probably at Strickner's house because John had a huge pool and jacuzzi, the perfect place for physical therapy with a little disabled boy. But Susan went out God knows where, dressed like a $1,000,000 fool. Was she so angry at him for falsely accusing her that she went to get revenge? Oh my God. If so, Early deserved it. And then he found it a gray BMW parked in full view of Delaney's, a quiet club next to the Marriott. Early took a deep breath. Things didn't look too good. Early slipped inside and found a quiet, dark place near the bar where he could inspect the place before deciding what to do. His heart sank when he finally saw Susan. She was sitting at a table in the center of the club. A handsome man about her age was sitting opposite her. Susan leaned across the table, her companion holding her hands. They seemed to be engaged in a deep personal conversation. Well, maybe Early was wrong about Strickner, but it seems he wasn't completely wrong. Early ordered a drink and just sat there for a long time, watching his wife and her friend talking. Then Susan got up and went to the ladies' room. Early moved instantly. He crossed the room with lightning speed, grabbed his wife's unknown companion by the scruff of the neck and roughly lifted him to his feet. Hello, my name is Earl Conroy, and you're with my wife. Early, stop it now. A voice came from behind him. Susan jumped between her husband and her friend, pushing Early away. Early, this has gone too far. When will you learn to trust me? Then, turning to her friend, she said, Father Mike, are you all right? Did he offend you? Early felt as if all the air had been knocked out of him. A priest? Oh, damn it. I did it again. He closed his eyes, pursed his lips, and lowered his head. Father Mike, Early began in a low voice. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have attacked you like that. Susan, I do not know what you think of me. Early couldn't even look his wife in the eye. I know about the time you spent with Brandon. Actually, I came to you to apologize. It seems that all I've managed to achieve is to make myself look like a complete jerk. But Early, how could you even think of such a thing? I told you I only love you. Why can't you trust me? Early shook his head. I don't know. Probably. Early shrugged his shoulders. I don't know. Father Mike put one hand on Early's shoulder and the other on Susan's shoulder. I think I know. When trust has been eroded, even if by mistake, it takes time to restore it. Don't blame Early, Susan. He loves you. Listen, Early said, backing away quickly. You two finish your conversation. I'll meet you at home. Ellie, wait, Susan shouted, but Early ignored her. He needed time to be alone. As Early drove slowly through the city, realization slowly reached him. He's been a problem all this time. Susan was faithful to her vows to him, but he broke his vows to her. She didn't cheat on him with John Strickner. She took care of Jennifer's son so that Jennifer and John could spend a romantic weekend together. Then, when she returned home and heard Early lash out at her, demonstrating without a shadow of a doubt his distrust of her, she went out to talk to the priest. Suddenly, the question that filled Early's mind was not whether he could forgive Susan, but whether Susan could forgive him. Early made several stops along the way, but headed home to find the answer to this question. Susan was sitting in the kitchen when Early returned. I was worried while you were gone, she whispered. Early handed his wife a bouquet of roses, which he stopped to pick up. I also have champagne. If your partnership is confirmed, it needs to be celebrated. Susan shrugged her shoulders. I won't know until tomorrow, but I think there is a chance. John said the senior partners were quite convinced. All they wanted to see was the outcome of the Melrose case. Early put a bottle of champagne on the counter and hugged his wife. How do I start apologizing for what I accused you of? I think you'll find a way. Susan buried her face in Early's neck. What hurt the most was not that you didn't trust me, but that I did it for you. John told me that he would like to propose to Jennifer during a romantic vacation. He also knew that she would never leave Brandon with someone she didn't trust. He arranged for me and a private therapist to spend 2 days at his house with Brandon. While they were both in Cancun, the nurse and I were at the pool giving Brandon therapy. Susan kissed Early tenderly. In return, John received a timeshare, an international vacation exchange system among co-owners of club-type resort hotels, for a condominium in Costa Rica. He promised that you and I would be able to use it for a week next June for our anniversary. Early kissed his wife tenderly. The hugs grew more intense as their tongues fought. When the kiss broke off, Early whispered, I promise never to distrust you again. I belong to you, darling. And I belong to you. Always have been and always will be. Early scooped Susan up in his arms and carried her into the master bedroom. Despite everything, Susan's smile melted his heart. Her eyes sparkled with love as Early took off her dress over her head. Early couldn't help but laugh at how things had changed in the last few hours. He was the one who helped take off that gorgeous dress in the end. Susan kissed Early gently on the lips and then climbed onto the bed. Early quickly took off his clothes and joined her. He liked the soft satin feel of the peplum, belt under the chest, Susan, when he held her close. It was a long evening, and Early was in no hurry. Making love to Susan tonight will be something special, and at least tonight this big bed won't be lonely. It's good that Jennifer loves money, and I managed to replace the bag from the pantry, the last thoughts of a falling asleep fool.